The evening sun painted the sky of the frontier colony in shades of orange and gold. Myra stood near the wooden fence that surrounded her family's land, her hands clenched around the rough wood. She had worked on this land her whole life, tending crops and watching over the small herd of cattle her father prized. Yet today her heart was restless. The council had spoken, and their decision had been final. She was to marry Joran, the towering cowboy from the neighboring ranch. The news had fallen on her like a heavy stone. Myra had never asked for such a union. She wanted freedom to choose her own path, to see the wide plains beyond the colony, maybe even travel to the distant cities she had read about in old books. Instead, she was told her marriage would secure peace. The colony was not alone on this planet. Joran's people had been here long before the humans had arrived. They were taller, broader, and stronger. Their culture was tied to the land, to herds, and to the wide skies. For years, tensions had simmered between settlers and giants, each side suspicious of the other. The council believed this marriage could ease the strain. Myra's father, who had always been practical, told her it was for the good of everyone. Sometimes duty must come before desire, he had said. But Myra wondered if he would feel the same if it were his life being traded for peace. When she first saw Joran, she felt her breath catch. He stood well over 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and quiet eyes that seemed to carry entire storms inside them. His skin had the faint bronze hue common to his people, and his movements were steady, measured, almost cautious. He did not smile when the arrangement was announced. Instead, he bowed his head slightly as though accepting a burden he did not ask for. Myra felt a chill as she thought of the life ahead. How was she supposed to live beside someone so different, someone she barely knew? The following day, the small gathering for their union took place in the town square. It was simple. A few council members stood by, families watched with stiff faces, and the dry wind carried dust across the ground. Joran wore a long coat of dark leather, patched and worn from work on the ranch. Myra wore her mother's dress, the one with blue stitching along the hem. She felt like a piece of herself was being folded away and locked out of sight. When the words were spoken and the binding was done, Myra glanced up at Joran. His expression was unreadable, yet there was no cruelty in his gaze. Instead, there was a strange stillness, as if he had accepted his role long ago and expected nothing more than endurance. After the gathering ended, they rode back to Joran's ranch. The land stretched wide and open, with tall grasses that swayed like waves under the evening breeze. Wooden posts marked the borders, and cattle moved slowly across the fields. The ranch house itself was built strong, with walls of dark timber and windows that caught the last glow of daylight. Myra stepped inside and felt a quiet she had not known before. The house smelled faintly of smoke and leather. It was tidy, almost too tidy, as though Joran lived here but never left his mark fully upon it. A single chair by the fire, a table with worn tools, a shelf with old books she could not read, these were the traces of his life. Joran showed her the rooms with few words. His voice was deep but calm, carrying no hint of command. Myra noticed he kept his distance, moving with care as though he did not wish to startle her. That night, Myra lay awake, staring at the wooden ceiling. She thought of her home, her family, and the path that had been chosen for her. Outside, she could hear the steady steps of Joran moving across the porch, guarding the silence of the night. He did not come close, and he did not speak. Yet she felt the weight of his presence, like a shadow both strange and steady. Myra closed her eyes and whispered to herself that she would endure. But in the back of her mind, she wondered if this union was more than what the council had told her. There was something hidden behind Joran's quiet gaze, something that even he did not yet share. And so her life with the giant cowboy began, under a sky that seemed far too wide, with questions she could not yet answer. Morning came with a pale golden light spilling across the plains. Myra rose early, the sound of cattle drifting through the open window. She had expected noise, conversation, perhaps some gesture of welcome, but the house remained as quiet as the night before. When she stepped into the main room, she found Joran already gone, his boots missing from the doorway and his coat no longer on the hook. She followed the trail of dust outside and saw him across the field. He worked alone, moving with steady rhythm as he mended a section of fence. His massive hands held the posts with ease, his movements powerful yet careful. It struck Myra that a man of his size could have worked with speed and force, yet he treated each task with patience, as though every board deserved respect. When she brought him a cup of water, he looked at her with those storm-colored eyes and gave a single nod of thanks. No words, no questions, only quiet acknowledgement. Myra set the cup down and returned to the house, her thoughts restless. She wondered if he disliked her, or if silence was simply his way. The days passed in a similar rhythm. Joran worked from dawn to dusk. He rose before the sun, cared for the herd, repaired tools, and checked the ranch borders. His strength was unmatched, yet he never used it to intimidate. Even when wild horses charged near the fences, he calmed them with a steady hand and a low murmur in his native tongue. Myra watched from a distance, her curiosity slowly growing. At meals, he sat across from her with quiet dignity. He ate little, always finishing quickly before leaving her in the kitchen with the clatter of dishes. Sometimes Myra tried to start conversation. She asked about the land, the herd, even the books she had seen on his shelf. Joran's replies were short, never more than a few words. Yet she noticed he listened to her closely, his eyes fixed on her as though every word mattered even if he did not answer. One evening, a storm rolled across the plains. The sky turned dark, and thunder shook the air. Myra hurried to bring laundry inside when the wind caught a sheet and pulled it toward the ground. Before she could reach it, Joran was there, his arm steady as he caught the line with effortless strength. For a moment, their eyes met through the rain. She saw something in his gaze that startled her, not indifference, but an old weariness, as though he carried a burden far heavier than the storm. Later that night, when the storm raged hardest, Myra woke to find the house trembling under the wind. She peeked through the window and saw Joran standing outside, coat flapping against the rain, his broad form planted like an unshakable pillar. He faced the horizon, unmoving, as though guarding not only the house but something deeper. Myra lay awake, wondering why a simple rancher would stand like a sentinel in the dark. The next day, whispers reached her from the settlement. When she went to town for supplies, neighbors pulled her aside. "Be careful," one woman murmured. "His people are strong but not like us. They say he hides secrets." Another man leaned close. "Some claim he fought in battles long before we came here. Look at his scars. He has seen things none of us can imagine." Myra returned to the ranch unsettled. She thought of Joran's silence, his watchful gaze, his long hours alone at the borders. Perhaps the town was simply afraid of what they did not understand. Yet part of her wondered if their suspicions carried truth. That evening, she set supper on the table and finally spoke plainly. "Why do you never talk to me, Joran? You work hard, you keep this place running, but you never tell me anything. Do you even want me here?" For the first time since their union, Joran paused. He set down his fork and lifted his eyes to hers. The silence stretched so long she thought he might refuse to answer. But then he said quietly, "It is not that I do not want you here. It is that I do not want to harm you with truths you are not ready for." Myra's breath caught. His words were simple, yet they carried weight, like stones pressed into her chest. She wanted to demand more, to ask what truths he meant, but his gaze held a finality that warned her the moment was not yet right. That night, as she lay awake, Myra realized the distance between them was not built from dislike. It was built from something hidden, something he carried alone. The silence was not empty, it was a shield. And she began to wonder what Joran was truly guarding, both from the world and from her. The morning after Joran's quiet confession, Myra found herself more curious than ever. His words echoed in her mind as she went about her chores. Truths you are not ready for. What truths could a rancher possibly mean? The thought would not leave her alone. As the days passed, Myra began paying closer attention to her surroundings. The ranch was large, with open pastures, stables, and sheds that seemed ordinary. Yet small details began to catch her eye. In the barn, she noticed a heavy trunk tucked far back under a pile of worn blankets. It looked older than the house itself, made of dark metal instead of wood. Its surface bore strange symbols she had never seen before. When she reached out to touch it, the marks felt warmer than they should have, as though the trunk carried life of its own. Later, while Joran worked with the cattle, Myra wandered to the loft above the barn. There she found something stranger still, a rolled piece of parchment that was not parchment at all. When she spread it open, light shimmered across its surface. It was a map, but not of the colony plains. Stars marked the dark expanse, constellations she did not recognize, and circles drawn carefully around certain points. It was no farmer's chart. It was a star map, a guide to places far beyond their world. Myra tucked the map away quickly, her heart racing. Why would Joran have such a thing? He had always spoken little, and never once had he mentioned the sky or the stars. She told herself it could be a relic of his people, a cultural heirloom, nothing more. But doubt whispered otherwise. That night, while preparing supper, Myra glanced at Joran. He sat at the table, eating in silence as usual. His broad frame seemed calm, but his eyes carried shadows. She wondered what else he hid. The trunk, the star map, did they connect to the scars she had seen across his hands and shoulders? Scars not made by ranch work, but by battles. A week into her life at the ranch, Myra found another clue. While gathering firewood near the shed, she stumbled upon a wrapped bundle wedged behind stacked planks. She pulled it free and unwrapped the cloth, revealing an object that stole her breath. It was a weapon, but unlike any human design. Its barrel shimmered with a faint metallic glow, etched with the same symbols she had seen on the trunk. It was too advanced for a simple cowboy, too strange for the colony. Before she could study it further, a shadow fell across her. Joran stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he stepped forward and took the weapon from her hands with great care, as though it were dangerous even to hold. He wrapped it again and placed it back where she had found it. "You should not touch that," he said, his voice low but steady. Myra swallowed hard. "What is it?" He paused, eyes meeting hers, then turned away. "Something that belongs to the nights on the frontier were usually quiet. Crickets sang in the tall grass, and the wind carried a soft hum across the plains. But one evening, Myra woke to something different. A low hum, steady and strange, drifted through the air like the beating of distant wings. She rose from her bed and stepped toward the window. Above the horizon, faint lights flickered, moving too quickly to be stars. Her heart quickened. She had seen storms, comets, and shooting stars, but nothing like this. The lights shifted in patterns, weaving across the dark sky as though searching. Myra pressed her hand to the glass, whispering a silent question to herself. Then she saw Joran. He was outside again, standing tall in the yard, his gaze fixed on the sky. His posture was tense, every line of his body alert. When morning came, Myra found Joran already at work, but his movements were sharper, his eyes scanning the sky between tasks. She asked about the lights she had seen, but he only replied, "Best not to worry." His tone was calm, yet his jaw tightened as if the subject cut deeper than he wished to show. That day, Myra rode into town for supplies. The small settlement buzzed with unease. A group of women near the well whispered about cattle vanishing from ranches during the night. A trader claimed he had heard strange sounds beyond the ridge, like machines grinding in the distance. Others spoke of shapes moving across the sky. Fear was spreading quickly. When Myra returned to the ranch, she carried their worries with her. She wanted to confront Joran again, but when she saw him tending to a calf with patient hands, she hesitated. His quiet strength was disarming, and though she longed for answers, she knew he would not give them easily. That night, the hum returned, louder than before. Myra could not keep herself inside. She stepped onto the porch, the cool air brushing against her skin. The lights danced across the valley, weaving closer this time. Suddenly, a shadow shifted at the edge of the pasture. One of the cattle cried out, then silence fell. Myra gasped and turned toward the house, but Joran was already moving. He crossed the field in long, powerful strides, carrying a lantern in one hand. The light revealed strange tracks in the soil, deep impressions that did not match hoof or boot. Myra's breath caught as she realized something unnatural had passed near their home. Joran knelt, studying the marks. When he rose, his expression was grim. Later, when they sat at the table, Myra could no longer hold her questions. "You know what those lights are, don't you? And the tracks? They are not storms or wild animals. They are something else." For a long time, Joran was silent. His eyes fixed on the table, his hands folded with unusual stillness. Finally, he spoke. "They are not of this valley. That is all I can tell you now." His answer only deepened Myra's unease. She lay awake long after, the images of lights and tracks spinning in her thoughts. She remembered the weapon hidden in the shed, the star map in the barn, the scars on Joran's hands. Each piece of the puzzle pressed on her, urging her to uncover the truth he kept locked away. On the fourth night, the whispers of the town grew louder. Myra heard a group of men speaking near the trading post when she delivered grain. "It is his kind," one muttered. "They bring trouble. Always watching the sky, always hiding secrets." Another added, "Mark my words, if something comes, it will be because of them." Myra's chest tightened. She wanted to defend Joran, yet she knew little about him. The silence between them felt heavier now, no longer the quiet of strangers but the weight of unspoken truth. That evening, Joran stood on the porch again, his tall frame outlined against the fading sunset. Myra joined him, her voice steady though her heart raced. "Whatever is coming, I need to know. I cannot stand in the dark while danger circles around us." Joran's gaze met hers. His eyes were tired but unyielding. "There are things I must tell you, but not yet. To know them too soon is to carry a burden you may not wish to bear. Myra clenched her fists, torn between frustration and trust. She wanted to press further, but something in his voice stopped her. He was not dismissing her fear, he was protecting her from something far larger. As the night deepened, the hum returned once more, echoing across the plains like a warning. Myra stood beside Joran, her questions burning unspoken, and wondered what shadow from the stars was drawing closer to their quiet valley. The air carried a heavy stillness that night. Myra sat by the fire, trying to read an old book, but her mind refused to focus on the words. The humming in the skies had returned each evening, and each time it lingered longer, stronger, and closer. Joran paced outside as though waiting for something he already knew was coming. Myra finally set the book aside and stepped onto the porch. Joran stood at the edge of the yard, his coat pulled tight against the wind, his gaze fixed on the horizon. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, a sharp cry split the night. It came from the pasture. The cattle scattered, their hooves pounding the earth in panic. Joran moved instantly. He snatched the lantern from the porch and sprinted toward the noise. Myra followed, fear tightening in her chest. As they reached the field, the lantern's light revealed a terrifying sight. A dark shape moved among the cattle, tall and mechanical, its limbs long and jointed like an insect. Its eyes glowed faint blue as it scanned the herd. The machine turned toward Myra, and in that instant, it felt as if it saw her, not just the cattle. She froze, her breath caught. Then Joran was there, placing himself between her and the creature. His hand lifted, and to her shock, he held the strange weapon she had seen wrapped in the shed. He fired. A beam of light struck the machine, sending it staggering backward with a sharp metallic cry. Sparks burst from its joints, but it did not fall. Instead, it lunged forward with startling speed. Joran met it head-on, moving with strength Myra had never imagined possible. His blows were precise, not wild, as though he had faced creatures like this before. The fight ended with one final strike of the weapon. The machine collapsed in the grass, its limbs twitching before falling still. The smell of scorched metal filled the air. Joran stood over it, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, the weapon still glowing faintly in his grip. Myra could not speak. She stared at the broken machine, then at Joran, her mind racing with questions. He turned toward her, his expression no longer calm but weighted with a decision he had avoided for too long. "You were not meant to see this," he said, his voice low. Myra took a step closer. What was it? Why was it here? Joran looked down at the machine, then back at her. For the first time, his eyes no longer held silence but truth. It is a hunter. They were built long ago to track and destroy. They come from the stars, following the path of an ancient war. I thought they had ended their search, but I was wrong. Myra felt her chest tighten. And you knew about them? That is why you keep watch every night. He gave a slow nod. Yes. I was not always a rancher. Before this place, before this valley, I was a soldier. My people fought against these machines across many worlds. We won battles, but we did not end the war. Some of us took oaths to guard the places they might return to. I am one of those few. The words struck Myra like a storm. She looked at the man she had been forced to marry, the silent cowboy who fixed fences and mended barns, and saw him in a new light. He was not only a giant in body but in purpose, carrying a duty far beyond what anyone in the colony knew. But why here? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Joran's gaze turned toward the pasture, then the hills beyond. Because something lies beneath this land. A secret older than either of our people. The machines search for it. If they find it, not only this colony but many worlds will be at risk. Myra felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Her marriage, once a burden forced upon her, was now bound to a hidden war she had never imagined. She wanted to ask more, but Joran's face grew stern again. This truth is dangerous to carry, he said. That is why I stayed silent. I wanted to keep you safe from it. But now you have seen, and you cannot turn away. Myra's heart pounded. She thought of the council, the settlement, the whispers of fear. They knew nothing of this danger. Only she and Joran stood between the colony and the shadows creeping across the skies. As the night stretched on, Myra sat beside Joran near the broken machine. She no longer saw him only as the quiet giant she had been forced to wed. She saw him as a guardian, someone who had lived through battles and chosen exile to protect others. For the first time since their union, Myra felt a spark of choice within her. She had not chosen this marriage, but now she had to choose whether to stand with him in the fight that was coming. The broken machine lay in silence at the edge of the field, its metal body cooling under the night sky. Myra sat near the fire, her thoughts turning like restless wheels. She had seen enough to know her life would never return to what it had been. Joran's weapon, his hidden strength, and the words he had spoken about hunters and oaths had changed everything. Yet she sensed he was still holding something back. The truth he had given her was heavy, but it was not the whole of it. She saw it in the way he stared into the flames, his jaw set tight, his hands gripping his knees as though they held a weight invisible to her eyes. At last, Myra broke the silence. You told me about the hunters. You told me about the war. But you did not tell me why you agreed to marry me. Was it only the council's will, or was there more? Joran lifted his gaze slowly. The firelight flickered in his storm-colored eyes. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he spoke with a voice low but steady. The marriage was not only for peace. It was also to hide me. To give me cover while I waited. Myra frowned. Cover? From what? From them, Joran answered, gesturing toward the broken machine. They track my kind. My people are fewer now, scattered, hunted. If I stood alone, it would not be long before the hunters found me. But with a bond, with a family, I could remain hidden among the settlers. A man with a wife, a ranch, and a herd draws less suspicion than a lone soldier with scars and secrets. The words cut into Myra. Her chest tightened as realization dawned. So you married me to protect yourself. Joran's voice softened. At first, yes. It was the only way. The council agreed because they believed it would bring calm between our people, but I agreed because it gave me the chance to remain here, to guard what lies beneath this land. Myra felt her throat tighten. Her marriage, the choice that had been forced upon her, now carried a truth that stung deeper than she expected. She had thought herself a bridge between two communities, a sacrifice for peace. But in truth, she had been part of a plan to shield him. Yet Joran was not finished. His eyes held hers, and what came next shook her even more. There is something else you must know. It is not only the hunters I watch for. Beneath this valley lies a vault, sealed long ago. It holds a weapon created to end the war. A weapon too powerful for any world to hold safely. My oath is to protect it, no matter the cost. Myra's breath caught. She remembered his words from before, that something in the land was worth guarding. Now the meaning was clear. their home, their fields, even the cattle, they were all cover for something buried beneath their feet, something that could destroy or save entire worlds. Her voice shook as she asked, "And if the hunters find it?" Joran's face hardened. "If they find it, they will use it to finish what they began. They will not only destroy this colony. They will spread destruction across every place they reach. That is why I cannot leave. That is why I accepted this life, even though it was never truly mine to choose." The fire crackled between them, the weight of his confession pressing heavy on the air. Myra looked at him, this giant cowboy who had been silent, distant, and strange. For the first time, she saw the depth of the burden he carried. He had not chosen her out of love, nor even out of duty to the council, but out of a desperate need to protect a secret too large to share. Yet something inside her shifted. Though his words cut deep, they also revealed the truth of his sacrifice. He had taken a life of solitude, carrying scars of war, to stand watch over a danger that none of the settlers even knew existed. He had bound himself to her not out of cruelty but out of necessity, and now he had trusted her with a truth that no other human had heard. Myra rose and walked to the doorway, staring out at the valley. The stars above shimmered cold and distant. She thought of her family, of the council, of the settlement that carried on in ignorance. If they knew what lay beneath their land, fear would consume them. Yet if they remained blind, danger would one day strike without warning. Behind her, Joran spoke once more, his tone softer than she had ever heard. "I did not want to bind you to this life. You deserved freedom, choice, and peace. But fate tied us together, and now you know why. You were never only my shield. You may also be my strength." Myra turned back to him, her heart torn between anger, fear, and something she could not yet name. She had been forced into this union, yet now she saw that her place beside him carried meaning far beyond what she had imagined. As she met his eyes, Myra understood one thing clearly. The shocking truth had changed everything. What lay ahead would not be an ordinary life. It would be a fight against shadows older than her people, and she would have to decide whether to stand beside Joran or walk away. The valley lay quiet in the early morning, but the calm was deceptive. Myra stood beside Joran on the porch, the wind tugging at her hair. Above them, faint lights flickered in the sky once more. The hunters had returned, stronger and more numerous than before. Their presence made the ground seem smaller, the fields vulnerable. Myra felt her heart pound. The truth Joran had revealed weighed on her heavily, but she no longer felt fear alone. She felt purpose. She had seen his strength, his sacrifice, and the secrets he guarded. Now she understood that her life, though once forced into a union, had a role in something far larger than herself. Joran turned to her, his tall form solid in the soft light. "This time, they will not leave without taking what lies beneath. We cannot wait any longer. You must decide if you stand with me." Myra met his gaze. She thought of the weapon hidden below the valley, of the star maps, and of the nights spent watching him guard the land. She remembered the way he had fought to protect her, to protect the cattle, to protect the colony without asking for praise. Her fear melted into resolve. "I stand with you," she said, her voice steady. "I will not leave." Joran's storm-colored eyes softened. A small nod was his only reply, but it spoke more than words could. Together, they moved toward the barn, checking the weapon and the star map one last time. The ground beneath them carried centuries of secrets, and the bond between them felt stronger than it had when the council had first forced them together. As the hunters approached, their glowing eyes and mechanical limbs emerging from the distant hills, Joran gave Myra a simple instruction. Stay close. Trust your instincts. We fight together. The first machine lunged across the field, its movements swift and precise. Joran met it head-on, his strength and skill unmatched. Myra followed his lead, carrying tools and devices he had taught her to use. She moved quickly, guided by his instructions, her fear replaced by focus. Together, they disabled one machine after another, the valley echoing with metallic crashes and sparks. Hours passed, but Myra did not tire. She could feel the rhythm of the fight, the pulse of Joran beside her. He moved with purpose, but always aware of her, protecting her with every step. For the first time, she understood the meaning of his silence. His restraint, his patience, and his quiet strength had been a training ground for this very moment. By nightfall, the last hunter fell. The valley was quiet once more, the machines disabled, the threat driven back into the shadows. Myra stood beside Joran, her chest heaving, her hands covered in dust and sweat. They looked at each other and shared a moment of understanding. Words were not needed. They had fought side by side, and their bond had been forged through fire, fear, and trust. The settlement soon learned of the battle. The townspeople, once suspicious and fearful, came to understand the truth of Joran's vigilance and Myra's courage. The quiet giant who had seemed strange and distant was now a hero. The young woman who had been forced into marriage was no longer merely a bride but a partner in a struggle that had saved them all. That night, Myra and Joran stood on the porch together, the stars above clearer than ever. The valley, once filled with whispers and fear, now felt alive with possibility. Myra realized that what had begun as an unwanted union had transformed into something meaningful. She had chosen to stand beside him, not out of obligation, but out of respect, trust, and something deeper she had not yet named. Joran's hand brushed against hers, tentative but certain. She took it, feeling the warmth and strength in his grip. For the first time, the silence between them was not heavy or guarded but comforting. Together, they had faced danger, uncovered secrets, and protected the land. As the wind swept across the plains, Myra smiled. The future was uncertain, but she knew one thing. She would not face it alone. With Joran beside her, they would guard the valley, the colony, and the secrets beneath the earth. They would face whatever shadows came from the stars with courage, strength, and the bond they had chosen together. In the quiet that followed, Myra understood that life, even when forced in unexpected directions, could reveal truth, purpose, and the beginning of something extraordinary.